All right, Noel. Episode 35. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, episode 35 of the Noel Casler podcast. We appreciate you guys listening. We're looking forward to getting back into it. Just a reminder at the top of the show, I got a great live show coming up in a few weeks. It's going to be at the Wall Street Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut. I'm really looking forward to that, continuing my tour of harbor towns. And then I'm heading up to Boston, man. I'm going to be at Boston on December 23rd at City Winery. 2 shows that night. The eve of Christmas Eve. My name is Noel for a reason. Let's pretend it's Noel. Throw some umlauts on it and come on out and kick off the holiday Christmas season. And then I'll be back in New York City, my home harbor town, on this January 23rd at Iridium, Les Paul's old nightclub. And I was there at the opening of that club, that particular location in Times Square. And I got invited because I got to know Les Paul a little bit way back in the day. I'm a huge gear junkie and guitar junkie. And, you know, Jimmy, you might not know this, but like all your father's music and stuff, we all owe a debt to Les Paul. And it's not just the invention of sort of humbuckers and, you know, his innovations on the electric guitar. It's multi-track recording. The guy invented modern multi-track recording. He was like a tinkerer and a bit of a hoarder with gear and stuff, which I am. And so I got to know him a little bit, and I was there at the opening of Iridium, God, easily 20 years ago. And it was pretty funny because he invited a bunch of people to jam with him, and he had Slash there. And Slash comes out and sits on a stool, and Les's stool, which I had an opportunity to buy one time after he passed away, and I missed out. That was the Jim Irsay, when Jim Irsay bought Black Beauty. But so like Les is sitting there on a stool, and he brings out Slash, and Slash sits down next to him on this stool, and Slash has a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, as Slash is wont to do, right? And it was all these fancy people there because it was opening night, and there was this like society lady in the front row, and she goes, "Oh my God, he's smoking." Like she was completely disgusted, right? Slash takes the cigarette out of his mouth, leans forward, and drops it in the lady's drink. Like that's some rock and roll stuff right there. I was like, damn. It was hilarious and exactly what you wanted Slash to do. I know it's not kind, but it was funny.
Yeah, no, that's about as Guitar Hero as it gets, man.
Yeah. That was back in the day. That was before Slash got sober. I'll tell you some more Slash stories sometime. I had a great one at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. I talk about that stuff on my live show. So if you want to hear some crazy rock and roll stories, come on out. Norwalk, Wall Street Theater, November 18th is next up. And we're going to get into it, Jimmy. Jimmy's got his Superman t-shirt on. He's all dressed up for trick-or-treating. Is that what you're going to be? You're going to be Superman this year, Jimmy?
I work smarter, not harder. You know, like I'll just buy the candy that I want ahead of time. That way I don't have to deal with, you know, all the, I mean, I'll go to a Halloween party and everything, but you know, it's tough, like with glasses, to find something. That's why I went with Clark Kent today. That way I could still see you and, you know, do my job for the show and be appropriate for the weekend. You know, I got to fit the theme, right?
There you go, Super Jimmy. Right on, brother. You're more like Jimmy Olsen.
That's fair. That's fair.
But anyway, so here we go. Let's kick it off, man. What a week. You know, I say that every week, but it doesn't seem to be relenting, you know, or it's unrelenting. And the week started with this Rolling Stone article, and, you know, shout out to them for making some waves. Noah Shackman took over recently, and he's doing a hell of a job. And they had a story on Monday, which I'm sure you guys all heard about, where they had, you know, it was unverified sourcing, but it said what we all know to be true, you know, that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Paul Gosar and all these other guys were sort of in on the planning stages of the attack on January 6th, you know, and we've known that. There was a little bit more information on the war room at the Willard, which is just mind-blowing because I hadn't known that Bernie Carrick was there. And Bernie Carrick, for folks that don't know, is sort of like the scumbag. You know, he was a police chief in New York City after 9/11, just a pure grifter. You know, if sort of Giuliani was the head of that particular wing of the crime family, which was the NYPD and New York City in that era, Bernie Carrick was like the consigliere, you know, like the chief enforcer. Just to give you an example of the sort of character he has, Jimmy, after 9/11, they gave these apartments to be used overlooking the pit, you know, for cops to go like take a shower and take a nap and have a break from digging through rubble and pulling out human body parts of your colleagues, right? And your friends and neighbor, which is what happened on that recovery pit. You know, it took almost a year and friends of mine got cancer doing it. You know, it was pretty rough duty to say the least. So there was this apartment that they provided for these guys to, you know, take a break during the day, take a shower, you know. And Carrick used it for himself to sleep with his mistresses. Because he was the chief of police. So he just used it as a place to like cheat on his wife. And, you know, just that's the kind of guy he is. And we all know, you know, he went to prison and stuff. But anyway, the fact that he was in that room, the fact that he was the one in charge of the billing, this came out in the article, is that he charged $55,000 in those hotel rooms, paid for it through his company, and then reached out to Trump's campaign fund to get reimbursed. And apparently he did get reimbursed. So why I mention that, Jimmy, is because that's my old business. I'm a tour manager. You know, I was a road manager and a tour manager where you pay the bills. Like there's got to be somebody in charge of the logistics of an operation. And who better to do it than a guy who's basically an administrator, you know, besides being a scumbag. You know, police commissioner is a guy who's making all those pieces move and work. So he is the kind of guy you'd pick as your tour manager. But it basically means you had sort of like an official kind of imprint on this insurrection. It means it was planned. Like they had golf carts, Jimmy. I've done a lot of productions in DC, from tree lightings that you see in the back of the White House to 4th of July stuff, you know, to Kennedy Center honors, all this kind of stuff. It's very hard to rent a golf cart in DC. Okay. They don't have golf courses in Washington, D.C. You know, I think there's a public course in Rock Creek Park, but like my point is those have to be booked in advance. Okay. That's a major production thing. When we do the Super Bowl in Indiana or in Indianapolis, you got to advance that stuff months in advance, you know? So at the very least, at the beginning of November, they were planning for what was going down in January, you know, and they're like, who's our guy to make sure we're set up here with an infrastructure to pull this off? And they reach out to Giuliani and Carrick. Bernie's our guy. He owes us one anyway. Trump pardoned him, you know? So my point in all that is that this thing was like official, you know, like we knew they made t-shirts and stuff, but this thing had receipts. Okay. So the January 6th commission should be like, show us the receipts. Who paid for this? Why were you paying $55,000 in hotel rooms for a guy who should have been leaving office in 2 weeks to have one last rally? You know, that's a big investment for a grifter like Trump, you know, to have his campaign pay for. He thought he was going to stay. And all these other nutbags like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, these QAnon people who were just thrust into the national spotlight and houses, you know, and seats in Congress, were more than willing to go along with the more nefarious elements. You'll never convince me that Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't that bomber. That bitch was the bomber. Okay. Like, and if she's not, then hook her up to a lie detector test and let me watch the interrogation, because I don't believe it for a second, you know? And I don't know why they're taking so long to slap some cuffs on some of these dudes. You know, sometimes justice needs to be swift. I'm tired of this. We're dotting the I's and we're crying. No, just arrest these guys. Because in the meantime, you have guys like Tucker Carlson, who had a program the other night that was like a QAnon call to arms. It looked like a freaking Al-Qaeda training video. You know, they're getting these monsters to think that they're in a holy war now. And these people are starting to fight back. We hear about it every day. Acts of violence on airplanes, in stores, you know, and white men, angry white men in these pickup trucks are just itching for a fight. You know, we come from a people that violence is in our DNA. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we
Mhm.
stole this from, and we stole this land from indigenous people and slaughtered them and thought nothing of it, and then made up a big myth that we were somehow heroes, and conquering the new world. Like it's bullshit. We were guys that didn't want to pay taxes to England and came and stole a bunch of land from indigenous people and then enslaved other people to work the land and then didn't want to pay for anybody else to get a leg up. And that's basically what we're dealing with now. Billionaires complaining about paying taxes. You're a freaking billionaire, bro. If Coldplay is at your daughter's wedding, you can pony up some tax money. If nothing else, for they're just having bad taste. All that money and you're hiring Coldplay? Come on. You know what I mean? You got more money than sense. And no offense to Coldplay, I'm just joking. But my point is, if you have so much, why not share some of it? And now it's institutionalized. As I say every week, these big corporations own these politicians, and two people can ruin the whole thing. And the two people I'm talking about, one of which just made like a cosplay video with that Mormon dude yesterday. Who's the senator?
Oh, Cinema?
Mitt Romney and Cinema.
Right.
I didn't see this show, but this Ted Lasso show, they like recreated Ted Lasso.
Oh,
Did
right.
you see this thing?
I haven't seen that yet.
How did you not see that, Jimmy?
I'm gonna look at it right now. Here, let me look at it right now.
No, you're on air now, dude.
I haven't seen it yet, but let me.
It went viral. It's the kind
of
of thing you would have sent me. But anyway, they made a little thing where they recreated a scene or a picture from I can't log into Apple TV, so I've never seen Ted Lasso, but apparently it's Ted Lasso. Like they're mocking people is my point. When you see Kristen Sinema get confronted in an airport, she has contempt for her constituents. She hasn't had a press conference. She hasn't had a town hall. She's like, F you, get out of my face. I'm here talking to Tim Scott. I'm here talking to the Republicans. The only person Kristen Sinema shows deference to are Republicans. That should give you some indication of where her heart's at. She's kissing asses of the people that just killed 600,000 Americans, and let a drug addicted grifter in a diaper run this country into the ground for 5 years so his kids could get a little more money in the bank. And then his kids went off into the sunset. You're not hearing, you know what, Jared Kushner, he got like a $40 million investment or something even more, like 20 billion. I don't know what it is. We don't have a fact checker. If anybody wants to be our fact checker, apply in my DMs. But Saudi Arabia, KSA, MBS just granted Kushner like this massive investment for his new securities firm, his new investment firm. Like Kushner's going to start a hedge fund and get a massive endowment because he was using his position in the White House to not only grift people, to sort of sell state secrets, to, cover up the murder of journalists and American citizens. And now he's getting a paycheck out of it. That's what Trump provided to people. He provided Steven Mnuchin and all these guys to make a fortune and a killing. And now they're back out there on Fox News every night. Kayleigh McEnany is on there. And these guys are more powerful than we are. As I say it all the time, the right wing and the QAnon and Fox News is like Metallica playing in a fucking church parking lot. Okay. And we're a couple of dudes with a ukulele singing Kumbaya, in a windy, field somewhere. And we need to sort of amp up our message. And we need to move past obviously manipulative things where it's just like, here, send me some money and help us get these people out of office. No, you're just trying to build your own brand and consolidate it and work on the same model that you've seen other people work on. Let's elevate individual voices. Okay. Don't be a follower. This isn't the time to be a follower. This is the time to look within, find out where you can make a difference in your life and go make that difference. Go feed somebody. There's enough money in campaigns. If you're not going to do away with Citizens United, which is what you should really do, you don't really need to give all your money to a PAC on the left either, because it's still a PAC. It's still a super PAC. It's still the kind of thing that's screwing this stuff up. These videos are cute and stuff, but you're preaching to the choir. And I'll put myself in that that same thing too. Anybody listening to this podcast is not really doesn't need their minds changed about something, right? What you
Right.
need to do is you need to change the culture at a cultural level. So anytime you see something that's making it at us versus them, blue team versus the red team, that's dangerous, because those emojis might feel sweet when you put them on your little Twitter and stuff, but like, it ain't going to make a difference. This is boots on the ground, walking across your neighbor's lawn and saying, hey man, I know we disagree, but how can we find some common ground here? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree with you, Noel. And one of the first lessons I learned early on when I was doing TV, I was doing TV production when I was in high school, and you learn quickly that with each production, you're only as good as your weakest crew member, so you try to position people where they're able to succeed as best they can. And we all knew back in 2016 when Trump was elected that, like, when you elect a guy that deplorable, the people he's going to surround himself are just as deplorable. And then you give them international contacts and access to all of these resources that only privileged people do. It doesn't shock me that, all these meetings happened and you had that police chief, sleep with his mistress. I mean, that's Trumpian right there. All of his friends act the same way he does. That should indicate to you the kind of person that Trump is.
Yeah, it's not just that police chief. It's Bernie
Right.
Kerik. He went to
Yeah.
prison. Okay. He was gonna be attorney general at one point, or head of the FBI or something, before he got busted. Like, the dude is bad news. And Giuliani, most people don't know the history of Rudy. Rudy's political career, after he was a prosecutor at SDNY and cleaned out the Russian mob, or cleaned out the Italian mob that Trump had always done business with, the 5 families, right?
Mhm.
The Genoveses and, the Gambinos and stuff, which Trump sort of split from his father and started building in Manhattan. Traditionally, that wasn't their territory. Trump's dad built in Brooklyn and Queens and North Jersey, which was controlled by Genovese, a different crime family. And then Trump was like, I'm going into Manhattan and building a tower. And this is a quote. His father was like, that's not our territory. Like, we don't do it there. And Trump was brash. And like, so he got Fat Tony Salerno and like later John Gotti, who you've heard of, Sammy the Bull, all these guys, and started building in Manhattan. Right. And then bigger money came in the scene, which was the Russians, and then Giuliani basically started busting all these guys and doing business with the Russians. And that's where Trump and Giuliani have sort of made their fortunes, right? Money laundering operations in New York City for the Russian mob. So Giuliani was a prosecutor, and then his political career began on racism. David Dinkins was our first African-American mayor in New York City, and the cops hated him because a lot of NYPD cops are just straight up racist guys. I'm sorry to say that. There's good cops, but I know dozens and dozens of NYPD guys that I've known forever. Guys that I love, that I've worked with. There's a lot of cops that work in the music business on touring and things like that and production. But these guys are like dudes from Staten Island and Long Island and Copland, which is Orange County, like out, the outside of the city. These guys all go back to the white suburbs. And I've covered this a lot, but they're sort of from this kind of racist point of view. Giuliani exploited that. And these guys were mad at Dinkins, and they had a rally down at City Hall, and it got out of hand, and they started calling city council women that were African-American the N-word, and just getting really violent and nasty. Giuliani was there, saw what was going down, grabbed a bullhorn, hopped on top of the roof of a car, and started egging them on, and basically started a race riot with a bunch of NYPD cops. So that's where he began. And it's no coincidence that this week we had cops close down the Brooklyn Bridge, right? We had them in front of Gracie Mansion, which is across the street from where I used to live, right? You sent me that clip. I'm like, Jimmy, that's outside of my old apartment, and I lived there when Giuliani was the mayor and telling everybody that the air was safe to breathe after 9/11. And I'd watch him come home every night, get out of his SUV with a mask on in November. And I'm like, you're lying to everybody right now, And he capitalized on that, right? How many people fell for that America's mayor bullshit and thought he was a good guy? He wasn't a good guy. He was a scumbag, as I've covered many times, But the media goes along with myth because it sells magazines. And if you're editing a magazine, you're making a good money. And you want to kind of keep your job, but you want to pay for your kids' college education. You don't want to make a lot of waves, Same with CNN. So that's how we got Trump, right? but we never did anything about the forces that are manipulating this kind of stuff. And now they're stronger than ever. So now they can snap their fingers and have all these cops show up outside Gracie Mansion, chanting they're not going to wear masks. They're not going to get vaccinated. Right. Listen to me, Jimmy. For 35 years, every time a cop has searched somebody in New York City, the first thing he says to them is, do you have any needles in your pockets? You have any needles or sharp objects? That's so he doesn't get pricked with a dirty needle that gives him HIV, right? Which is a spreadable disease, right? So you can't pretend like you don't care about spreading disease and infection. It's a political thing. They're being manipulated by their unions to protest. And it was also presented from the beginning as I'm a Trump guy. I'm not wearing a mask. We would ride by Midtown South, Jimmy, which is the precinct just south of Times Square. And it's where all the patrolmen that walk around Times Square all day, the foot patrol guys, the beat cops, the ones that are most likely to come in contact with other people face to face, right? Mm-hmm. They're not in a car, they're on foot. So we would walk by at the shift change. This is last June, early July. So pretty much at still the height of the pandemic, right after New York City had, ambulances 24 hours a day. Everywhere you went, you would hear ambulances bringing people to die. Right after we had field hospitals and stuff. And I'd drive by that precinct and all the cops would be out for shift change, right? Like 100, 150 cops standing on the front steps. There'd be like 2 of them that had masks on. The rest of them, no masks at the height of this thing. So they were never in the mindset of protect and serve. They were in the mindset of I ain't wearing a mask. That's a liberal thing. Right. What? You're not wearing a mask? It's insane. But the one blessing we have now is this kind of stuff is illuminating these differences. It's showing us who these folks are that have been in positions of authority and how they've been manipulated by the powers that be. The NYPD was started to bust unions, and the garment district and stuff, when people would try to unionize, the NYPD would go in and crack some skulls. And then you'd give up on trying to, make a fair working place. The cops in this country were started to prevent slaves from escaping, enslaved people from escaping, so our authority and our law enforcement has always existed to enforce capitalism, basically, in many cases. And it's not to say cops aren't heroes and firemen aren't. They are, individually. Okay. The guy who lives in your town who's a cop is a great guy, right? But get him all together and have him vote with his union, right? And he's not a great guy because they're not acting in the public safety right now. You're wasting time shutting down a bridge. You're not preventing other crimes. And we all know they look the other way when they get mad. So when the Black Lives Matter protest happened last year, this is what NYPD does. I've seen them do it before. They basically just walk away from any kind of street crimes. They're like, all right, you want to criticize us? Fine. Somebody's shooting up on your block now and I ain't doing a damn thing about it. That's what happens. They sort of try to punish the citizens by letting quality of life stuff just go out the window. It's a gang. Right. I'll tell the Springsteen story. I don't know if I've told it on here, but I don't even know if I have the energy to tell it. Have I told you the 41 shots story, Jimmy?
I don't believe I've heard the 41 shots one.
I'll tell it another time. All right. It's too much.
No, I hate to make this comparison, but you're right. When people don't wear a mask, it kind of reveals the amount of empathy they have, because we're still in the middle of this thing. I got my booster on Tuesday, and everybody that was working at the CVS had a mask on. Every person that was older than 65 had a mask on. But who's the guy that doesn't have the mask on? The middle-aged white guy trying to walk in tough. I have an underlying condition and I follow the rules, and I want to protect other people, so I'm going to be masked up. But the mask thing has kind of become, and I'm not calling these people this, but it's similar to the Nazi patch, where kind of where they stand. Not exactly. You should ask them, but it really has. You're right. It's brought to light where people are politically from 100 feet away. You can begin to tell.
Yeah, you could just tell. I went into an antique store yesterday, and I could just see this guy was like a skinhead with a long beard and stuff, looked like he played bass in Anthrax, and I walked in there with a mask, and you could tell right away he was like a libtard, and that's so dangerous, the fact that we've become so polarized. Jimmy, you're probably too young for this, but people didn't used to have like big pickup trucks with flags flying out of the back of them. In normal before times, that shit didn't happen. Okay. Somebody would have a flag outside their lake house or something, but they weren't hanging them out their windows and stuff. They weren't wearing t-shirts with Trump's face on them, like nobody had Obama like tattoos. It's been branded. And you had a senator, obviously the most despicable senator in the Senate, Ted Cruz, defend Nazi salutes.
All right.
And Merrick Garland was like, yep, you're right. A little too quick to say that, in my opinion. He should have been like, screw you. That's a deplorable example. You may technically be correct, but I'm insulted by the insinuation, and you should think twice before saying such a thing in the well of the United States Senate, right? But Cruz was doing it to get points, because he knows Nazis are popular in Texas. He knows Texas has come out with a new kind of authoritarian Nazism. And that's what this is. This is a white supremacist movement. That's what Tucker Carlson and all these guys are in for, right? That's what they're doubling down on. And there's a ton of money in it, Jimmy. Some Australian guy sitting on his super yacht, with Mick Jagger's ex-wife feeding him grapes, does not give a fuck if your city burns up. Okay, he's not going to be affected by it, but his bank account is, and we're being so manipulated. It's so blatant, but we don't have the right team to stand up against it, because we get easily distracted. We get thrown off course by these chaos agents. Of course, we have to somehow convince Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, who have already gutted this bill. Your grandma's not going to get new teeth when her natural ones fall out now. She's not going to get dental. She's not going to get reduced, drug prices. The child tax credit is only going to be a year now. So enjoy summer camp this year, because it ain't happening again next year. These cruel policies that the GOP have always promoted are now part of what we have to accept as Democrats, because of two sort of bad actors. They're like boll weevils or something in a field of wheat. One little bug can destroy a whole acres and acres of grain, a pest. And that's what this is. That look what Trump did. It's the best example. One guy did more damage to this country, albeit with a whole industry behind him, and with CNN and all these other guys making a buck, and New York Times and a lot of people in New York looking the other way, including all the people I worked with on Celebrity Apprentice, who were like, yep, you're right, Noel, but what's going to happen? I ain't saying shit. But he's on drugs. Yeah, so what? You know what I mean? What's it in it for you? I got kids to put through college. And they were right, truth be told. Right?
Well,
what happened? I told people that. So what? It didn't make a fucking difference.
Well, and you brought up Ted Cruz, the evolution of that guy to go from 2016, vote your conscience. He does whatever will benefit him the most at that time. Come and take it. He wears that to the inauguration. I mean, I wish someone would just grab him by his mullet, and I don't know. We're getting at a boiling point, like you said, these folks in pickup trucks are looking for a fight. And as much as, we want to try to add to the anger, hopefully the rage doesn't get too much more oxygen. It does die out. You said that a couple weeks ago, and hopefully we're just at the point where it's really starting to rage, and it will eventually go away.
I don't know, Jimmy. I don't know that it's not going to go away on its own. It's like I said in my car rant today, you have to cut off the source. It's not going to go away while Fox News and OAN,
right,
and social media and Meta, which is new Facebook, there's too much money in it. There's too much money, and the people that are making the money aren't going to get hurt. What I think is going to happen is, I think in the next election, you're going to get 20 more Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Paul Gossars. Yeah. And Lauren Boeberts. And then I think most people will give up, which is what they want. They want you to get so burnt out, you're just going to walk away and start living your life, and sort of cede vast swaths of this country to MAGA land. I'm not going back to Texas. I'm not doing a show in Florida. Like, that's obvious to me now. This is not a temporary thing, and the people that do that stuff, they need to make money. I get it. They're rich. People keep talking about Dave Chappelle. He opens for Joe Rogan, or Joe Rogan opens for him. They switch off. They play arenas in Texas and Florida and stuff at the height of like where the Delta thing is surging. He's not worried about sensitivities and stuff. He's cashing in. It's not free speech. It's a fucking money grab. If you really care about people, you're not playing in states where they can die for coming to see a comedy show. Joe Rogan's fans are not wearing masks, or maybe they have mask requirements actually, but do you know what I'm saying? These are the knuckleheads that are spreading this kind of stuff. Your barstool sports nation, this sort of just like, and I don't even know what that is. I just know they do dumbass misogynistic stuff, and that whole sort of, I know the Joe Rogan bros, we've lost a year talking about ivermectin and just idiot stuff. And these idiots make a fortune. Nobody listens to me in comparison with like Ben Shapiro. You know what I mean? Joe Rogan has like Alex Jones on his show. Just deplorable people. If I'm Dave Chappelle, I'm never sharing the same stage with Joe Rogan ever if he had somebody like Alex Jones on his show.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's not, oh, we need to hear both sides of the story. There are no both sides at this point. You're either on the side of justice or you're an asshole, and if you're picking on people that are marginalized already, you're not a comedian. You're not making people think. You're distracting, right? Because it's going to get a bunch of clicks, and then your name is going to be in Twitter and everyone's going to be talking about you. It's maddening, and it's so manipulative, and we're an easily manipulated population now, right? We're all like just monkeys dancing on a string or puppets on a string. Ooh, click, click, click. You can see what they did to Alec Baldwin last week. Trump Jr. selling t-shirts. They laugh at this stuff. Trump Jr., by the way, got his ass kicked in the Comedy Cellar in 2003 because he was laughing too long at like racially tinged material from the stage. He was laughing really loud, and the people at the table next to him got pissed off, and then he spilt his beer on one of their girlfriends. So two Goombas, a dude from Brooklyn and Staten Island, kicked the shit out of Don Jr., like put him in the hospital. He had to get stitches and stuff. And of course, like Don Sr. called up the Comedy Cellar and made him apologize and everything like that. And they love Trump down there, but that's the kind of guy he is. He's always been somebody that, has the most punchable face, just a complete scumbag. So people are shocked that he did that. Like, that's who he is. I used to tell people, if the Dalai Lama met that guy, they'd be like, man, I want to punch him so bad. Like he would make Gandhi,
Mother Teresa want to slap him.
Because he's but that's seen as like powerful, right? That kind of like lack of humanity, of making a joke about a young woman who lost her life, whose child is now going to grow up without a mother. That's not funny. That's horrific. I don't care if you don't agree with their politics. That's a horrible tragedy. It's not an opportunity to grift and sell t-shirts and make points, but you had members of Congress sending out tweets making fun of that. Lauren Boebert, we've gone past a point that most societies have never gone past before. And if you look at history, this is when things crumble, right? The Roman Empire, all these other sort of civilizations and empires crumble when it becomes out of balance. When a few people have all the wealth and everyone else is just kind of digging around for crumbs and angry, that's when stuff gets real gnarly, real fast. And we're approaching that on warp speed with something that they never had, which is the internet, which is the ability to manipulate other people 24 hours a day over the internet. That should horrify everybody. Inventing the internet was like giving everybody their own nuclear reactor in their house. Like it's a dangerous technology that we didn't really see at the beginning. We didn't really, we thought it was just going to be this neat thing where like, look, you can connect with your high school girlfriend and see what she's up to. And, like
Yeah.
we didn't really see how it could be manipulated by bad actors, and we're seeing that now, and it's probably too late to do something about it. We're not going to get the last 4 or 5 years back. It'll take 20 or 30 years to dig out the damage. 600,000 Americans didn't get to see Christmas this year. Another couple of 100,000 won't next year, probably. Somebody like you, Jimmy, you wouldn't be alive right now if you lived in New York City. I hope you know that. Like if you, I don't know that for a fact, but if you weren't living in a little house where you could have isolated in the last year, if you had to get on a bus to go to your doctor's appointment or something in New York and walk the streets and have your food delivered, to your door, you and your mom would have been in a lot more danger than you are in your little house. That's why so many people die in New York City, because we're all on top of each other, Jimmy.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? We're all in apartment buildings where there's 2,000 people in your little building.
And the ventilation goes
That's
through each floor.
right, exactly. Right, yeah. And it's spread like crazy, and you have pre-existing condition, and that's like, you should be able to live anywhere in this country safely, and you can't. And there's many people like you. Every day on Twitter, you see somebody had to bury their child.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Well, and Republicans, for as long as I've been around, when I started paying attention, it was right around 9/11, but they've used kids for about 20 years to try to get elected. Now kids are dying and are on ventilators in hospitals, and they still don't care. I thought about it yesterday. I wish that I didn't lose my dad 2 years ago, but I couldn't even bear him getting COVID and having to say goodbye to him over an iPad. Like that wouldn't have worked, I just think about all the people that didn't get a funeral, didn't get a birthday, have lost high school graduations, college graduations. They don't want to have a wedding. They don't want to have kids. Our lives have been destroyed. For what? A single man.
Yeah. And you've lost treasures.
What the fuck, man? I don't say that word usually, but we took this beautiful thing, the one thing that we're supposed to care about, and we screwed it up.
What's the one thing we're supposed to care about, Jimmy?
Democracy and truth. Truth has been screwed up to the point that it's going to take a long time to undo.
Well, you'll never have truth again. It's alternative facts. Truth is now a tangible, untangible sort of asset. Truth is like, my truth is different than your truth. And you have people running on this. Carrie Lake is running in Arizona. You have people that'll just straight up lie to your face. You have members of Congress that won't answer questions honestly, whether or not Trump won the election. You have an election in Virginia next week. Yeah. If this Glenn Youngkin, wins, forget about it.
It's already over.
And Virginia's racist AF. Okay. There's some little pockets of liberalism, but my family had to move out of Charlottesville where my grandparents retired because they just got sick of all the like sort of racist kind of right wingers and gun nuts and stuff down there. And this was pre-Trump, Right. So, I don't even want to comment on that race. We'll let it fall as it does, but Godspeed and get out and vote if you're a Democrat, and like you said, we lost some treasures. I knew 12 people who died in the last year of COVID. And the first one that I'd known was John Prine. He was a genius. And the last time I saw him, he and his beautiful wife, Fiona, John gave me $100 bill, a crisp $100 bill. We had worked together the night he was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Yeah. And at the end of the night, he's like, hey, come back here, at his hotel room. And his wife handed me, John wants you to have this, and gave me $100 bill. And I'm not in a tipping business, Jimmy. And he wasn't like Oprah or somebody, $100 is $100. It's a lot of money, that was a very generous thing to do. And I took such pride in it that he thought I did such a good job. He wanted me to have that. And I also carried that $100 bill in my wallet for the rest of the summer. Cause I'm like, where do you spend $100 that John Prine gave you? What's worthy? You're not just going to spend that on whatever, like, do I get a bunch of guitar strings? Like, what should I get with this? And I just carried it around because it reminded me of him all summer. And then I was sitting on the beach in Nantucket, and I was thinking about John and thinking about what I was going to spend it on. And it came to me and I was like, barbecue. I'm going to have a big barbecue, and I did, with seafood and everything. And Nantucket had a big cookout on the deck and stuff, partied up, because I think that's what John would have wanted, sharing it, create an experience,
Yeah.
And John Bryan was just a wonderful communicator. And my point is, like, that guy was a national treasure. That was an artist who made this country richer and better. And he had many, pre-existing conditions. Okay. So when he got COVID, it was like, you knew he wasn't going to make it, and I'm trying to get to the point you said, when you don't protect the most vulnerable among you, when you think it's just, we're in survival of the fittest mode, then what are you championing some great country and democracy for? Because that's what countries do, is they protect, the vulnerable amongst them. That's why you form societies, right? Otherwise, just everyone on their own, and your little kid wanders out from the cave and a saber-toothed tiger bites their head off or something, right? You change that and put people on watch. Hey, you stay up all night and make sure a woolly mammoth doesn't step on me while I'm sleeping. You know what I mean? Like when you sail a boat across the ocean, you have somebody on watch at night, sitting up, making sure you don't run into an iceberg or something. Do you know what I'm saying? There's a function of society, and that's what Trump broke down. That's what Putin wanted him to break down. That's why we're on the ropes right now, right? Because you're taking away security and certainty, and you're making it this sort of every man for himself kind of thing. And, that's dangerous. And it also, that feeds into the NRA and all this other kind of stuff, because then people want to buy more guns, right? Yeah. They want climate change because then they want a bigger pickup truck. Well, global warming, climate change, better get a big pickup truck, since I'm going to be driving through 18 inches of water. We got like 6 inches of rain this week, Jimmy, and it's going to rain all day tomorrow. It's a massive storm every day, but whatever. It's crazy. It's a crazy time. Let's tell some ghost stories. It's going to be Halloween. I loved Halloween as a kid. As I've said often, I grew up with kind of most of my early childhood was with a single mom outside of DC in PG County. We lived in these apartments, and we'd walk to the nice rich kids suburb, and they weren't even rich kids. They were middle class, but they had those nice houses and all that candy. And, Halloween was my favorite because you would get candy, you would get a lot of stuff that you couldn't normally afford. And it was fun to trick or treat and run around with your friends and stuff. It was, and I like to dress up. I went to acting school. I always wanted to be somebody else until I had no choice but to be myself. But, it's fun. I was Kiss one year. Kiss was big when I was a kid, and Star Wars had come out when I was a kid. Back then, you would buy these cheap costumes at the drugstore, with this plastic mask and a rubber band and like this plastic suit. If somebody like flicked a cigarette ash on you, you'd probably catch on fire. That stuff was probably so dangerous. We didn't have the same kind of stuff in this, protections in the late 70s, early 80s. And one of my main Halloween memories was somebody poisoned Tylenol, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So like there was a Halloween, I don't know, early 80s, and everything was like, check your candy and stuff, but I enjoy that. I enjoy the ghost stories too, Jimmy. I'm going to tell you another one here. In Maryland, there was a lot of old Civil War houses. And I know I told the one about like going to Gettysburg, and my mom was obsessed with the Civil War. She just read every book she could on it, almost an unhealthy obsession she had with like Civil War era stuff. And my uncle had lived in this old farmhouse. He was kind of a hippie, and he lived in this shared farmhouse in Maryland, kind of in a rural part of Maryland with like some other people and hippies and stuff. And this house was so clearly haunted, and they would have a big Halloween party every year. Right. Uh-huh. And this house was like, one dude spent the night in that house once, and the ghost like didn't like him. Because this is the kind of thing where you'd wake up and your bed would be rocking and stuff. Like your bed would physically be moving and stuff. Dang. And people, you just have to live with it. Like you'd be like, oh, that's the ghost, I'm just going to chill. And this one dude, like the ghost did not like, and he had to leave the house at like 2 a.m, like in the snow and stuff, and just like walk 10 miles out of there because the ghost scared him so bad. But I remember this one Halloween party. And I was there with my mom, and my mom, as I said, was into the Civil War, into the ghost stuff. And she's like, there was one room in the house that nobody went in because it was just way too creepy. So nobody rented it. Okay. And it was like, it had old stuff in it that came with the house. So it was like a storage room. Right. And we went up there with a Ouija board and did a seance on Halloween. Right.
Yeah.
And we're doing this stuff. And then the ghost is basically like, I'm here. And I look over in the corner of the room and there's a closet, and the closet door is kind of just swings open a little bit. And there was a Civil War wheelchair. Have you ever seen what a Civil War era wheelchair looks like, Jimmy?
What does it look like?
It looks like wood and stuff. It looks creepy. It looks scary, dude. And that was just like a Civil War era wheelchair. And I just got completely like goosebumps. Like I didn't see anything in the wheelchair, but I felt presence in the wheelchair, if that makes any sense. And when I heard that, like, I'm here, I was just drawn to like look in the corner, and I hadn't seen that before. You know what I mean? I hadn't seen that door open, and I was like, oh my God, there's a Civil War like wheelchair in this room. And it got really cold. So there's a lot of times if you see a ghost, you just get this cold kind of feeling, like there's a drop in the pressure and stuff. So anyway, I don't know if that's true or not, but it scared the hell out of me, especially on Halloween. I mean, I know it's true because I lived through it, but I'm not trying to convince you that ghosts exist, but sleeping in an old Civil War farmhouse is not for the faint of heart. I'll put it that way,
Yeah. Did that presence like lift after a couple of minutes, like the other story where it just hung around and then it eventually went away?
No, we got the hell out of the room.
Oh, good.
That wasn't going anywhere. That house was like, I think that house was probably a field hospital. If I remember correctly, it was used as a Civil War field hospital. And if you got shot in the Civil War, Jimmy, they were just like, here, bite down on this piece of wood, and they're sawing your leg off and stuff. Right. So an old farm that got sort of commandeered by the Confederate Army, or the Union Army or whatever, to treat soldiers, like those guys were basically going to get tortured in there. You know what I mean? Like most people wouldn't leave, you'd get gangrene, like wouldn't live, you'd get gangrene, like really bad stuff happened in those kind of places, which is where you end up with the ghost stories, right? It's like sort of people that kind of die unexpectedly or violently and don't want to leave this plane. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah, there's a really cool place in Indiana, cool for Indiana, I guess. It's called Conner Prairie, and it's essentially Indiana in the old times. It's like a theme park of where you can see what it was like in Indiana back in the old days. And you go to the medical tent and they've got like pliers and stuff to get people's teeth out. I mean, modern medicine isn't something to sneeze at. We should feel lucky that we have all the technology that we do when you look at old tools that were used to try to heal people.
Dude, exactly. Yeah. And that's the insanity with the anti-mask stuff. Like you have to get a vaccine, bro. It takes 2 seconds. You're getting a shot in the arm you can't even feel that could prevent you or somebody you've never met from dying alone in a hospital hallway while their kid says goodbye to them on fucking an iPad, right? Just abject horror could be prevented by simple modern medicine. And we don't want to do that, right? You got some people thinking it's against their best interest to protect other citizens. I won't get all back into it, but yeah. And these people that think they're like tough guys that are going to fight the Civil War never would have gotten through the first Civil War, right? These fat ass like dudes that think they're soldiers are going to get winded walking up a flight of stairs. MAGA is not in shape as well as they think they are. They're toxically sort of like pumped full of all this stuff that makes them feel like tough guys, because you got a Punisher sticker, and you got little Dan Crenshaw and all these other cartoon characters, fetishizing this stuff. You got Ted Cruz frying bacon on his gun thing. These guys were hiding under chairs when it happened on January 6th, right? Where were all the tough guys then, right? Besides Adam Kinzinger, like nobody did anything, right? These guys were hiding. Your buddy Mike Pence was peeing his pants, and now he's saying don't get vaccinated, right? That guy, I don't want to go back into the politics, but that guy, that just shows you just the just the insanity of these times that people could be so feckless, so without any kind of backbone or spine, because it's the party line. It just disgusts me. I apologize to the people listening to this week,
Yeah,
when
me
you,
too, guys. It's been a rather dark week for me, but there's a lot of dark going on. Let's be honest. There's a
Yeah.
lot of dark going on.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing musicians. What do you guys think of that? Let me know. I'm just going to start interviewing my music buddies and get away from the politics and stuff. Jimmy can produce, and I'll just get some musicians on here because
That's right.
politics is getting old, but keep listening. We appreciate you listening. Have a safe and happy Halloween. As I said at the top of the show, I will be at the Wall Street Theater in Norwalk, Connecticut on November 18th. It's going to be a killer gig. Get your tickets now. I'll also be in Boston at the City Winery on December 23rd. And then back in January, I'll be in New York City at the Iridium on Wednesday, December. Maybe it's 21st. I'll give you that date later. But until then, keep listening. You can check out my man, Jimmy Kennedy. Tell them where they can find you, Jimmy.
You can find me, JBK on air, on Twitter and Instagram. Also, jbkonair.com. That's where all my stuff is. So check it out.
Yeah. Are you doing yoga yet, Jimmy?
I'm always doing yoga. I do a daily session of yoga.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I try to do at least a few poses a day. That way I'm, it's good for me to stretch, especially for me, because I have cerebral palsy and I got to keep my muscles, loose. The quicker I get in shape, the longer I'm walking. So
man.
I'm trying to be as active as I can while I'm still young.
Good for you, buddy. Yeah, no, it's good for everybody. I do it too every day, stretch, and it's what we need. It's that kind of stuff. It's holistic approach. You got to get in touch with your body now. You got to make decisions that are like benefiting all living creatures as opposed to taking away and adding more suffering in the world. It's almost like we're all being called to kind of do what we can, because this is all hands on deck. The ship is kind of like needs everybody grabbing a bucket and bailing the water at this point, because we're taking on water, and water is ignorance and hate and fear and all these things that these guys will exploit that don't have your best interest at heart. Tucker Carlson is not going to be on the front row lines with you. Trump did not march to the Capitol with the people, right? They're going to hide in their gold encrusted towers while the rest of the stuff burns. So you got to do what you can to make it better. And thanks for listening, and have a safe and happy holiday. Oh, it's not a holiday, it's Halloween. Okay. Don't drink too much, get home safe, and we'll see you next week. Episode 35 of the Noel Casler podcast is complete. Thank y'all. Peace.